Season 1 of Deadwood opens in 1876 and introduces Seth Bullock, the Marshal of the Montana Territory who puts down his badge and retires from the dangers of being a lawman to instead move to the burgeoning settlement of Deadwood in Dakota. There, he and his friend and business partner Saul Starr open their own hardware store, buying a vacant lot from the powerful Al Swearengen. Al runs the local brothel The Gym and has his hands in almost every business dealing happening in and around Deadwood. And although he isn't the official leader of the settlement, there is nothing that is done without Al's knowledge or consent. Al is extremely ambitious in not only his own personal quest for power, but also in maintaining Deadwood's status as a sovereign territory, free from the western expansion of the United States. Working alongside Al are his loyal right-hand man Dan Dority and bumbling lackey Johnny Burns. E.B. Farnum is the owner of the Grand Central Hotel with delusions of grandeur, despite being easily manipulated into doing Al's bidding. Trixie is a prostitute at the gym whom Al is in an obsessively abusive sexual relationship with. A.W. Merrick runs the local newspaper with a mission to uphold his journalistic integrity amidst the corruptible nature of Deadwood's vices. And then there's Doc Cochran, the camp's moral voice of reason, who isn't afraid to stand up against Al's more villainous plots, knowing that no harm can be brought to him as the camp's only doctor. The infamous gunslinger and former lawman Wild Bill Hickok arrives in Deadwood, accompanied by his loyal friend Charlie Utter, who dutifully ensures the reckless Bill's financial prosperity, and Calamity Jane, a woman obsessed with Bill who puts on an abrasive and off-putting demeanor as a coping mechanism for her own insecurities as a woman living in a man's world. Bullock quickly strikes up a friendship with his idol Bill and the loyal Charlie. Bill is addicted to gambling and becomes a frequent regular at the poker table in a saloon run by Tom Nuttall. When a man named Ned Mason comes to town warning that he'd come across a family massacred by the nearby Sioux tribe, Bill forms a party, including Bullock, to investigate. Bill and Bullock discover a Dutch family had indeed been slaughtered, but their young daughter Sophia had miraculously survived. The pair bring Sophia back to the camp to be cared for by Doc, while also aligning in their suspicions that Ned had staged the massacre himself. When confronting the man, he pulls a gun, forcing Bill and Bullock to put him down. Jane helps Doc look after the young Sophia, worried that Al may have orchestrated her family's deaths as part of a bigger plot. Secretly, Ned was a road agent in Al's employ, working alongside Phil and Tom, who violently antagonized travelers outside of Deadwood, pocketing their valuables for themselves in an effort to help Al maintain power and control over his camp. But Al did not authorize the attack on the Dutch family and is furious over the mess they've created that could now implicate him. And so he orchestrates Tom's death and kills Phil himself. Meanwhile, Garret arrives from New York City, hoping to use his family's wealth to become a successful gold prospector. Brom's wife Alma resents their move to Deadwood, and in her depressed and loveless marriage, she falls into an addiction to laudanum. In Brom, Al sees the perfect mark and manipulates him into buying a gold claim that has already been completely pinched out. Brom begins to realize that he has been scammed and turns to Wild Bill for assistance. But when Bill refuses to help him recover his money from Al, Brom confronts the man himself. And so, Al enlists Dan Dority to kill Brom and stage it as an accident. But while killing Brom on his gold plot, Dan discovers a rich vein that proves the land to be way more valuable than anyone had thought. And so, Al tries to quickly buy the gold plot for cheap from the widowed Alma, before she can discover its true value. Suspicious of her husband's death, Alma turns to Wild Bill for help, who now takes up her cause to investigate Brom's death. Amidst this investigation, Alma begins looking after Sophia, which is complicated by her worsening laudanum addiction. Al sends Trixie to slip Alma dope in the hopes of causing an overdose, but instead Trixie takes an empathetic liking to the woman and begins to help her get clean. In return, Alma offers to help pay for Trixie to start a new life away from Deadwood, but Trixie refuses, not feeling worthy of being more than Al's sexual plaything. When Trixie overdoses on dope, Doc nurses her back to health, and Alma and the recovering Sophia give her further encouragement. Ultimately, Trixie chooses to stay in Deadwood and returns to Al's side. Despite this, Trixie develops feelings for the kind-hearted Saul, and the pair enter into a relationship despite Al's resistance. When Bill beats and humiliates the poor drunk Jack McCall in a game of poker, the furious and spiteful Jack murders the unsuspecting Wild Bill Hickok in cold blood. Bullock, Jane, and Charlie are devastated by this act, and Bullock takes matters into his own hands to personally see McCall brought to justice and hanged for his crime. Bullock then agrees to take on Bill's final mission before his death, investigating the gold claim for Alma Garret. This brings Bullock and Alma closer, leading to the two developing a romance. That romance is complicated by Bullock having recently married his brother's widow and adopting their son as his own, with the pair waiting to join him in Deadwood after he has finished preparing a home for them. Bullock confronts Al, knowing that he was trying to scam Alma out of the gold claim's riches. Ultimately, upon learning that the United States have made a peace deal with the Native Americans to officially annex Deadwood, Al gives up his schemes for the gold plot and revels in his hopes for a prosperous future. And so, Alma keeps her land and chooses to abandon her city life to permanently remain in Deadwood, and hires the prospector Whitney Ellsworth to oversee her gold claim. Realizing that Bullock is a trustworthy and powerful ally, despite his annoying and lawful nature, Al chooses to set aside their differences to align for the betterment of Deadwood's future. Meanwhile, a rival saloon known as the Bella Union opens in Deadwood, quickly establishing itself as a nicer and more popular destination than the gym. This infuriates Al, who begins scheming on how to run its new owners out of the camp. The Bella Union is run by Cy Tolliver, his right-hand man Eddie Sawyer, and the Madam Joni Stubbs, whom Cy has developed his own possessive affinity toward. The young and naive Flora then arrives in Deadwood alongside her brother Miles. Flora takes a job at the Bella Union and Joni takes her under her wings. Joni develops an affinity for Flora, which the young woman uses to her advantage, as truthfully she and her brother planned on robbing both the gym and the Bella Union. When Flora and Miles are caught, Cy kills Miles before forcing Joni to kill Flora. This emotionally devastates Joni, and a remorseful Cy chooses to finally let her go, offering to fund Joni's own business venture. When Joni resists taking Cy's money and falling into his debt, Eddie Sawyer begins stealing from the Bella Union to help fund Joni's new brothel. Meanwhile, a smallpox outbreak begins to spread throughout Deadwood. Doc gets some help from the selfless Jane and Reverend Smith to look after the many patients and nurse them back from the brink of death. Eventually, Al gathers the town's leaders to pool their money together to send riders out to bring back a vaccine. Amidst this, the Reverend begins suffering from increasingly severe seizures, which he believes comes from God, though Doc suspects are due to a brain tumor. After the smallpox is eradicated, a depressed and aimless Jane, still grieving Bill's death, falls into alcoholism and chooses to leave Deadwood. And as the Reverend's condition worsens with no way for the Doc to save him, Al mercifully puts him out of his misery. U.S. Magistrate Claggett arrives to discuss the annexation of Deadwood with Al. He pressures Al into offering bribes to help expedite the deal, and also insists that Deadwood would need to form its own government. During a meeting amongst the camp's leaders, E.B. asks to be named mayor, which Al allows in name only, knowing that he would retain the real power over the camp. Bullock agrees to become the health commissioner, refusing the responsibilities of becoming the town sheriff. Charlie Utter becomes Deadwood's new fire commissioner and threatens to fine Tom Nuttall if he can't bring his saloon up to code. This infuriates Tom, who decides to back the duplicitous Con Stapleton to become the town sheriff. Bullock is frustrated by this appointment, but still refuses to take the badge for himself. When Deadwood's opium supplier Mr. Wu has his newest shipment stolen, he goes to Al to demand retribution. Al tracks down the thieves, Jimmy and Leon, and kills Jimmy to offer to Wu as a peace offering. Seeing an opportunity to take down his business rival, Cy pays Leon to stir up public resentment toward Al for turning over one of his own to the Chinese. Soon, the resentment between the Chinese and American residents of Deadwood begins to grow violent, with the newly appointed Sheriff Stapleton only further instigating the conflict. And so, Bullock publicly confronts Stapleton and strips him of his sheriff's badge. As the season comes to a close, Magistrate Claggett returns to Deadwood, attempting to extort Al using a warrant out for his arrest for a murder in Chicago. Instead, Al bribes the magistrate's debt collector Silas Adams to kill Claggett and gain newfound power and wealth under Al's employ. Bullock then pays Al a visit, resigned to his inevitable calling and declaring that he will officially serve as the sheriff of Deadwood. You know, in less than the time it took you to watch the beginning of this video, I went to my kitchen and made an incredible dinner with grilled filet mignon, creamy Parmesan shrimp, roasted broccolini, and a squash medley from scratch. And that's all thanks to this video's sponsor, Factor. Factor's team of gourmet chefs create truly incredible meals that are fresh, never frozen, and dietitian approved and deliver them straight to your doorstep. Plus, there's no cooking or meal prepping involved. Just pop one of these delicious meals in the microwave or oven and you'll be enjoying the flavors in 5 minutes or less. You just go to their website, select from a variety of dietary options including keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, or gourmet plus like my incredible surf and turf dinner. Pick from over 35 different options for which meals you want to receive and how frequently they're delivered, and that's it. I'm a terrible cook. I hate having to go to the grocery store to shop for the various ingredients I'm gonna have to prep and cook, all for a dinner that doesn't even taste that great, and then I'm stuck with all these pots and pans that I have to clean. And so oftentimes I just end up ordering fast food. But as I get older, I want to take better care of my body than just a constant stream of greasy takeout. So I'm super appreciative for Factor helping me achieve my nutrition goals without breaking my bank or my spirit in the kitchen. Factor also offers breakfast options, small bites, juices. I personally like starting my mornings with one of their incredible smoothies. You can get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box using my link. So click the link in the description or scan that QR code with your phone. I genuinely love Factor and I think you will too. And if you use my link, you'll not only be getting a great deal on a great service, you'll also be supporting this channel and continuing to make content like this. So thanks to Factor and thanks to you for your support. Now let's get back to the recap. In season 2 of Deadwood, 7 months have passed and Seth Bullock is continuing his affair with Alma Garret. Alma is still caring for the young Sophia and has hired a woman named Miss Isringhausen to act as the girl's tutor. When Al publicly calls out Bullock for his affair with Alma, the two get into a brutal fight, seriously injuring them both. The fight only stops when a stagecoach arrives carrying Bullock's wife Martha and stepson William. After Bullock gets his family settled into their new home, he returns to the arms of Alma, reluctantly putting an end to their relationship. And with that, Bullock focuses on trying to have a happy marriage with his brother's widow. Meanwhile, Al is slow to heal from his wounds inflicted by Bullock's hands, suffering from painful septic shock and kidney stones. Doc Cochran fears that without performing a dangerous surgery, Al Swearengen may soon die. This devastates Trixie, who despite her complicated history with Al, has a deep love for him. Miraculously, with the help of Doc, Dan, and Johnny Burns, Al is able to pass a kidney stone and save his life, though suffers a stroke in the process. Slowly recovering from his injuries and wanting to keep his weakened state a secret from the public, Al is reluctantly forced to rely on Bullock more than ever to ensure the safety of Deadwood from scheming opportunists. Meanwhile, Alma discovers that she is pregnant with Bullock's baby. Alma had previously believed that she wasn't capable of having a child, so despite knowing that Bullock could never act as the child's father, she chooses to carry the baby to term. When Trixie discovers Alma's pregnancy, she goes to Ellsworth, who has long held unrequited romantic feelings for Alma, and suggests that he marry her to avoid her suffering the shame of having a baby out of wedlock. Learning of Alma's affair with Bullock, Miss Isringhausen snidely judges her employer, prompting Alma to fire Sophia's tutor. Isringhausen then seduces Silas Adams and offers to pay Al $50,000 if he agrees to testify that Alma paid him to have her husband Brom murdered. Al and Adams then realize that Isringhausen is working for the Pinkerton Agency on behalf of the Garret family, willing to frame Alma in order to take back Brom's substantial wealth for themselves. But Al remains loyal to Alma, exposing Isringhausen's true identity and forcing her to flee town. Elsewhere, Eddie Sawyer has fled Deadwood after being caught stealing from his friend and employer, Cy Tolliver. Realizing that his stolen money was used to fund Joni's new brothel, the Chezamee, Cy demands a cut of her earnings. Working alongside Joni as the madam of the Chezamee is her old friend Maddie. A sick and depressed Calamity Jane returns to Deadwood ready to die, but Doc Cochran inspects her and determines that her illness is caused by her excessive drinking, and encourages her to sober up. Jane then takes a job working for her old friend Charlie Utter, who has founded a freight and delivery company. Trixie begins getting lessons in bookkeeping from her lover Saul Starr, who plots to open a bank in Deadwood alongside Alma Garret. Dority grows jealous of Silas Adams' newfound connection and partnership with Al Swearengen, leading to the two fighting for his favor. Amidst these interpersonal conflicts, the geologist Francis Walcott arrives in Deadwood, in the employ of the powerful mining magnate George Hurst. Maddie warns Joni of her past experiences with Walcott, who is a sadist that takes his violent kinks out against prostitutes. Walcott manipulates the weasel E.B. Farnum to spread rumors throughout Deadwood that the residents' gold claims are invalid in the eyes of the U.S. government. Walcott then enlists Cy Tolliver to join in this duplicitous plot, and the pair begin buying up the valuable gold claims at a discount from scared owners desperate to sell. County Commissioner Hugo Jerry from Yankton arrives, in cahoots with Hurst, and further declaring the gold claims could be taken by the U.S. government, should Deadwood be incorporated into the Dakota Territory. As the angry residents of Deadwood, led by a man named Steve, attack Jerry for trying to invalidate their fortunes, Bullock is forced to intervene to save the man's life. When Cy realizes that Walcott is also trying to backstab him and secure the most valuable land for his employer Hurst, Cy angrily confronts Walcott over his violent kinks. The embarrassed and enraged Walcott takes his rage out by killing 3 prostitutes at the Chesamee, including Joni's friend Maddie. Fearing for her other employees' lives, Joni tasks her new friend Charlie Utter to smuggle them out of Deadwood. Charlie is furious over Walcott's actions and publicly beats the man, though he pays little mind to this affront. Jane and Joni then bond over the grief of losing their beloved friends Wild Bill and Maddie. Jane chooses to serve as Joni's guard against the villainous Walcott, and the two grow closer, with Joni helping Jane get clean, not just from alcohol but the literal crime that Jane has allowed to accrue over years of not properly taking care of herself. Elsewhere, Samuel Fields is an African-American general from the Civil War, who comes to Deadwood and befriends the livery owner Arnett Hostetler. They catch a valuable wild horse which they intend to geld and sell for a large sum. Unfortunately, the horse breaks free and runs wild through the streets of Deadwood, trampling the young William Bullock and tragically killing him. The entire town joins Bullock and Martha in mourning William. Andy Cramed, a former gambler left to die by Cy Tolliver after contracting smallpox, but nursed back to health by Doc Jane and the late Reverend Smith, returns to Deadwood a reformed man and newly minted preacher, performing the ceremony for William's funeral. As he mourns his stepson, Bullock becomes resolved to comfort Martha through this tragedy and become a better husband to her. Walcott then brings in Mr. Lee, a new rival to Wu, in transporting dope into Deadwood, and also establishing a stable of Chinese prostitutes that are kept in severely inhumane conditions, much to Doc and Wu's dismay. Wu appeals to Al for help in taking down Lee, but Al doesn't want to escalate a conflict amidst the worrisome news from Jerry that Deadwood will be annexed into the Dakota Territory, not only stripping people of their claims, but potentially bringing in outsiders to lead the local government, which would leave Al Swearengen completely powerless. And so Al plots to save Deadwood from a hostile takeover. First, he tasks A.W. Merrick with running rumors in his paper that Montana wants to stake a claim for Deadwood, manipulating Jerry on behalf of Dakota to sweeten their deal. Thanks to a united front with his allies, including Seth Bullock, Al accepts annexation into the Dakota Territory, with the promise that everyone will retain ownership of their claims and that Deadwood will remain self-governed. George Hurst finally arrives in Deadwood, taking over the many valuable gold claims that Walcott and Cy had tricked the residents into selling for pennies on the dollar. Hurst also buys the Grand Central Hotel from EB for a staggering $100,000, much to the bumbling hotelier's delight. Cy informs Hurst of all that Walcott has gotten up to in Deadwood in preparation for his boss's arrival, including the murder of the 3 prostitutes. And so Hurst furiously fires Walcott from his employ. The disgraced Walcott is then found dead of his own doing. And to ensure his silence over Walcott's acts, Cy demands 5% of all of Hurst's profits from his new gold claims. As the season comes to a close, Al finally sends Dan, Johnny, and Adams to accompany Wu and assassinate Mr. Lee and all of his accomplices. The residents of Deadwood then all gather for the wedding of Alma and Ellsworth, officiated by Andy Cramed. When Cy confronts Andy for bringing religion to Deadwood, a bitter Andy takes revenge for all of Cy's past slights against him by stabbing him in the gut. In the end, the former enemies Al and Bullock share a moment together, at peace with their alliance, having saved Deadwood. In Season 3 of Deadwood, the camp's first official elections are imminent. Seth Bullock, with Charlie Utter as his deputy, is running to keep his badge as sheriff, facing off against bartender Harry Manning in the public vote. And for town mayor, the knowledgeable and trustworthy Saul Starr decides to run against the sniveling E.B. Farnum. Unfortunately, the powerful George Hurst has taken nearly full control of Deadwood, making a massive home for himself in the Grand Central Hotel. He now has full ownership of all of the most valuable gold claims, aside from the plot belonging to Alma Garret Ellsworth. And so, Hurst tries to pressure Bullock into convincing Alma to sell her claim. But when Bullock refuses, Hurst vows to ensure he loses his bid for re-election as sheriff. Next, Hurst tries to force Al into helping him buy Alma's gold claim, but Al similarly refuses to work with the duplicitous man. And so, Hurst men, led by Captain Joe Turner, violently torture Al, including cutting off one of his fingers. Elsewhere, Alma officially opens the Deadwood Bank and continues her marriage with Ellsworth, with the two raising Sophia together. Unfortunately, the pregnant Alma falls ill, forcing Doc Cochran to perform a surgery that saves her life but kills her unborn child. As Alma falls back into her laudanum addiction, Ellsworth chooses to leave her, realizing that being stuck in another loveless marriage has impacted Alma's mental health and led to her relapse. And although Sophia is saddened by Ellsworth's absence, Alma manages to kick her laudanum addiction once again. Doc Cochran falls ill with tuberculosis, but despite his desires to leave Deadwood to die in peace, Al insists that the doc stay in camp, having developed a begrudging fondness for the man. E.B. Farnum is depressed now that he has sold his hotel to Hurst, prompting all of his supposed friends at the Gym Saloon to turn their back on him. After the death of Arnett Hostetler, the racist Steve takes over the livery. Despite his racist antagonism towards Samuel Fields, the new livery owner has developed a fondness for the general and attempts to prevent him from permanently leaving Deadwood. But when Steve is kicked by Fields' horse and left in a vegetative state, Fields can't bring himself to leave the camp, and instead ensures the care of the racist. While Saul is running for mayor, Al insists that it would be problematic for him to be in a public relationship with a prostitute, so he helps Saul buy a home with an adjoining room that Trixie can sneak through and allow the lovers to be together in secret. Meanwhile, Cy Tolliver is recovering from his stabbing by Andy Cramed, and the Bella Union has fallen into disarray. Sensing weakness, Hurst swoops in to blackmail Cy and force him into becoming a loyal lapdog. With her Chesame brothel all but closed down, a depressed Joni contemplates returning to work by Cy's side. Martha Bullock then begins using the Chesame as a school for Deadwood's children. As Calamity Jane falls back into heavy drinking, the young students at the Chesame view her as heroically as she once viewed Wild Bill Hickok, inspiring her to try to clean up her act once again. Joni helps Jane get clean, and the two begin to develop romantic feelings for each other. Elsewhere, Al's old friend Jack Langrish arrives in Deadwood with his theater troupe from Virginia City. Jack knows Al well enough to understand that the reason the Gym Saloon owner doesn't declare open war on Hurst is because he cares for Deadwood and its residents, and doesn't want to see them all going down with Hurst in a blaze of glory. Jack then buys the Chesame to use as a theater, promising to open a new school for Deadwood's children. As tensions between Hurst and the Deadwood residents escalate, the mining magnate's right-hand man Captain Turner provokes Al's right-hand man Dan Dority into a brutal fight to the death. Dan narrowly manages to defeat and kill Turner, but is left seriously injured and traumatized. As Hurst underpaid and overworked miners on his gold claims attempt to unionize for better wages and conditions, he begins having them murdered to send a message of his power. Despite Al's warnings to not provoke the man before a proper plan can be formulated, Bullock arrests Hurst for his crimes. Unfortunately, there is no hard evidence connecting Hurst to the murders, and Bullock is forced to release the powerful villain, who is now enraged by being publicly humiliated. And so, as Al hurriedly gathers Deadwood's leaders to come up with a plan to rid themselves of Hurst once and for all, Hurst brings in an army of Pinkertons to act as his protectors and enforcers. To make matters worse, Jerry returns to Deadwood to inform Hurst that the county has stationed soldiers outside the camp to help rig the upcoming elections in Hearst's favor. Fortunately, Mr. Wu alerts Al that he has secretly placed his own forces outside the camp, ready to intervene if necessary. As Bullock leaves Deadwood to campaign for sheriff, Alma is shot at while on her way to work at the bank. Al leads the charge in protecting her from harm and theorizes that Hearst orchestrated the shooting in an attempt to goad Bullock or Ellsworth into taking violent retribution, giving him the liberty to legally put them down. When Alma defiantly stands against Hearst, he sends Pinkertons to murder Ellsworth in cold blood. Upon hearing of this tragedy, Bullock abandons his campaigning and races to Alma's side. Everyone mourns Ellsworth's death, most of all the young Sophia, who has already lost her family once before. And to put an end to the violence threatened against her and the ones she loves, Alma reluctantly sells her gold claim to Hearst. Enraged by all that has happened, Trixie takes matters into her own hands and confronts Hearst herself, attempting to murder the man but only managing to shoot him in the shoulder. In turn, Hearst demands Al turn over Trixie's body as retribution. Realizing the shooting happened fast and that Hearst may not recognize Trixie, Al reluctantly kills a different prostitute named Jen in his employ, in the hope of tricking Hearst. As the season comes to a close, the election results come in, revealing that Hearst has successfully rigged the results to secure Harry Manning victory over Bullock to become the new sheriff. As Hearst then prepares to inspect the body that Al claims to be Trixie, an army of men assembled by Silas Adams and Mr. Wu lay in wait, should violence erupt. Fortunately, Hearst falls for Al's ruse and is satisfied that his would-be killer is dead. And so, all of his affairs finally settled, Hearst decides to retire from Deadwood. As the villain leaves, Cy Tolliver realizes that despite all of his machinations, he has been abandoned by Hearst and left with little to show for it, prompting him to murder his lackey Leon in a fit of rage. Bullock and Al can finally return to life as normal, though Bullock is forced to face the fact that the law and government have failed him, installing a worse candidate as sheriff, while Al is left scrubbing the bloodstain of Jen off his saloon floor, a permanent reminder of all that he has been forced to do for the sake of Deadwood. The story concludes in Deadwood the movie. 10 years have passed and the residents of Deadwood, old and new, gather to celebrate South Dakota officially becoming a U.S. state. After selling her gold claim to George Hearst, Alma Ellsworth has left Deadwood for many years, but returns for the celebrations with Sophia. Despite still harboring love for Seth Bullock, who is now a U.S. Marshal, her former lover reveals that he has found happiness in his marriage with Martha, and they now have 3 children together. Cy Tolliver has died, and Joni Stubbs has taken over the Bella Union in his stead. Calamity Jane returns from her own long sabbatical from Deadwood, realizing that it is now Joni who has fallen into alcoholism. Jane helps her old friend and potential lover get clean, just as she had been helped countless times before, and the pair rekindle their romance. Trixie is now pregnant with Saul's baby, as Saul runs a new hotel business with his old friend and partner Seth Bullock. And then there's Al Swearengen himself, who is suffering from serious liver failure while continuing to keep his beloved Deadwood in order. Doc Cochran has survived his battle with tuberculosis and is now caring for his one-time enemy. Amidst these celebrations and reunions, George Hearst, now a U.S. Senator, returns to Deadwood to the dismay of everyone, attempting to buy land belonging to Charlie Utter in order to install telephone lines. Utter refuses to sell, infuriating Hearst. When Trixie publicly confronts Hearst, the senator finally realizes that she was his shooter, and he had been tricked by Al all of those years ago. And so Hearst threatens Al to help him force Utter into selling his land, or else he will take retribution against Trixie. When Utter still refuses to sell, Bullock tragically finds his old friend murdered on his land. And so Bullock investigates alongside his deputy Harry Manning. Samuel Fields claims to have witnessed the murder but refuses to testify out of fear of retribution from Hearst. And so Bullock holds Fields in the marshal's office jail for safety until he is willing to talk. The conniving E.B. Farnum proves his loyalty by warning Bullock that Hearst has sent his hired killers Smith and Seacrest to murder Fields to prevent him from testifying. Meanwhile, Alma outbids Hearst for Utter's property, further infuriating the senator. At the marshal's office, Smith and Seacrest arrive and Manning allows them access to Fields, secretly working as an accomplice to Hearst. As the hitmen attempt to kill Fields, Bullock returns, killing Seacrest and capturing Smith, whom Fields identifies as Utter's killers, though still unaware of Manning's duplicity. When Bullock brings Smith to a confrontation with Hearst, a gunfight erupts, killing Smith in the chaos. With all of the conflict erupting in Deadwood once again, Trixie and Saul finally decide to get married. The ceremony takes place in the gym saloon, where Al gives Trixie away before leaving her ownership of the gym in his will, and encouraging the diplomatic and well-intentioned Saul to run for public office. Hearst interrupts the wedding reception with law enforcement officers to arrest Trixie for shooting him a decade prior. Instead, Bullock intervenes to have Hearst arrested, knowing the man was responsible for Charlie Utter's death. As Bullock escorts Hearst to jail, a vengeful Jane leads a mob of angry residents to attack Hearst and brutally beat him in the streets. Despite his history of enacting his own violent justice, Bullock is inspired by his family to intervene, saving Hearst's life to ensure he sees a proper trial for his many crimes. As Manning attempts to kill Bullock to free his secret employer Hearst, Jane intervenes, killing Manning to save Bullock's life. In the end, Fields comforts Bullock with the knowledge that Utter was at peace before his untimely death, allowing Bullock to return to his family in good spirits. And over in the gym saloon, Trixie is by Al Swearengen's side as he finally succumbs to his liver failure, hopeful for Deadwood's future, and just as stubborn in death as he was in life.